Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Trail Talk Highpointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and the Highpointer we're speaking with today is Guna from Chicago, Illinois. Guna, how are you?
I'm doing well. Really glad to be on your podcast.
Well, thanks for making the time to do this. So, can you tell listeners a little bit about how you got started in the outdoors and what got you highpointing?
My family and I had always been road tripping. Um, so I
Hmm.
remember like the one of the earliest trips I can remember was going to the Smoky Mountains, and getting to see the Appalachian Trail. My parents and I did a lot of road trips as kids, so I think that kind of inherently took us outside. But my parents weren't like really big hikers. Like we'd probably hike like a half-mile trail or something like that. But I think on the side, like when I went to like some summer camps, I would do a little bit more hiking. And like I remember I was at a summer camp in the U.S. Air Force Academy.
For the listeners who don't know, where is the Air Force Academy Summer Camp located?
Oh, so this is a summer camp in chemistry located at the Air Force Academy. So the Air Force Academy is just outside Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Okay. Hmm.
So it's fairly, at least for Colorado standards, not a super intense peak, but I think it was the first time that I was able to kind of organize at least those who wanted to go, and we were able to get to the summit, and it was those views were really cool. As and so like I did a little bit, so it was always kind of in that with that kind of background, kind of moving on to how I got high pointing. And I think it was during COVID actually. So I was back from college for about a week, staying with my parents, and my parents live in Pittsburgh. And at the time, I was looking for things to do. I think much like a lot of people. So I went online and looked up like anything to do, kind of extracurricular wise, and that kind of led me down a bit of a rabbit hole into like doing outdoorsy activities, and that led me to high pointing, like seeing the high pointing website, and then like looking at the high pointing website. I obviously at the time focused on high points closer to where I lived, so Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia. And it was a bit serendipitous because I was planning a road trip, just like a day trip, to see the Green Bank Telescope. And this was in somewhere like eastern West Virginia, about 3 hours away by car. And one like the reason why this radio telescope, it's a radio telescope. It's at least one of the things it does is it can kind of search for any potential radio broadcast that other life forms in the universe might be sending out. So I thought it was a cool day trip.
Hmm.
Um, and then from there, I figured, oh, I could add, these three seem pretty close, and I can kind of put them in my road trip. So I kind of when I did that, it was kind of and when I did the road trip and started to get these high points, it was pretty cool. Like, but there was like a teeny bit of accomplishment. So I think from there it was, oh, this is interesting. Let's do more. So I went to college in Connecticut, so it was a lot of those New England high points, which are also like fairly achievable. That started to come up, and from there it was almost like off to the races. And especially like with my personality, if I find something really interesting, I kind of uh, I get driven to kind of finish something like that.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah. So, for the listeners who don't know, can you give us a little background about what brought you to Chicago? And I understand you're a PhD student at the University of Chicago. What are you studying there?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a PhD. I'm a third year PhD student in chemistry at the University of Chicago. So what I'm studying right now is so I work in the subfield of chemical biology, and so that's really the combination of like chemistry and biology. So what I do specifically, I'll give like a kind of brief overview for those viewers who may not know the intricacies of all the intricacies. So when you think
Yeah,
about
that's
like
me too. It's not just the other listeners.
so all of the genetic material is in every one of our cells. But like you can imagine, our eye cells are different than our skin cells, And so one of the main ways that happens is through something called transcription factors. It turns on, like, transcription factors kind of turn on certain genes and say, hey, you're an eye cell, or hey, you're a skin cell. So when it comes to cancer, so our lab works on, we tried to, essentially what we're trying to do is mimic that transcription factor as it kind of interacts with the DNA and then turns on genes. The idea that our lab had was, hey, let's make this mimic, and that mimic kind of competes with the our native transcription factor. So if you think about like a battle, our transcription factor doesn't have all the extra stuff that turns on those genes. It just has the portion that binds to DNA, like that binds to the DNA at that site. Whereas the transcription factor has all these other parts to it that says, "Hey, turn on this gene." Um, and so when we have like, so we what we've shown, at least this is previous to me joining, we were able to see that that kind of idea was able to work, especially with this like high profile target. My job is like what we can potentially do with this kind of platform is we can target other transcription factors that are downregulated in cancers. So the idea is turning them on, essentially kind of creating something called an artificial transcription factor to kind of pretend that these certain transcription factors that are really important that are downregulated in cancer, we can then kind of mimic their action and almost like restore them back to like at least a normal state. That could potentially help in certain with certain cancers that can help reduce it. So that's the kind of basic idea of what I do. I should
Wow.
also tell I work in the lab of Ray Mollering. I should put that
Wow.
out there just in case.
That is really cool. So this intervention that you're working on,
Hmm.
could it work like in someone with advanced cancer? Or is it something that's preventative that you'd have to take like early on?
So the idea is that it should be available to those with advanced cancers. Yeah,
Interesting.
because
Wow.
the idea is you're interrupting that whole gene system, and the idea, and because of that, you're kind of you're stopping the growth of cancer. So
Yeah.
which hopefully through like either surgical means or other such means you could then remove all of the kind of cancerous cells.
Well, that's really, really cool. Well, I think I just wanted to ask you that because I am curious and I love the variety of people that find their way into high pointing, and I had to take advantage of this opportunity to ask about what you do. So I hope all the listeners enjoyed it, and I hope you guys learned something too. That's really very, very interesting. So, would you say that high pointing in the outdoors, do you have any time to do it right now while you're working towards your PhD? I know that's a laughable question, but I don't know, maybe on a weekend. Did you ever try drive out to Charles Mound like on a long weekend or something?
Oh, actually, yeah. That it's interesting you bring up Charles Mound. It's a somewhat small story because this was all around the time Oppenheimer came out.
Hmm.
So the big thing with Oppenheimer was it was shot in like 70 millimeter. And so like the 70 millimeter IMAX, I think the closest one to Chicago is in Grand Rapids. So I think that day I drove to Charles Mound, which is like very close to the border with Iowa, and then drove all the way to Grand Rapids to watch the Oppenheimer movie in like 70 millimeter IMAX, and then drove back home.
What do your fellow chemists say when you tell them about high pointing?
Oftentimes I don't really talk about it. Uh,
Yeah.
it's not something it just doesn't come up as a point of conversation, and I usually don't make it a point to bring it up.
Hmm. Well, hopefully you'll share this podcast with them.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us about some of your most memorable high pointing experiences?
Sure. I guess I have quite a few of them. I'll start off with so I start off with I guess like I think my most like memorable experience that I have, which was so I did Granite Peak this year
Hmm.
with one of my friends. And so we planned it as like a one day we planned it as a one day climb through the Southwest Ramp. Which is ambitious, but the with the mileage, I think it's like 28 miles, and the elevation difference is something like 4 to 5,000 feet. It's a doable, at least with my like based on what I'd done previously. I thought it was doable.
Yeah.
So we start hiking, and we I remember we like drove out from like he came, and his name is Andrew. He came to Chicago, and then we drove out all the way to Cook City, which is a about 20-hour drive.
Uh-huh.
And when we got there, we like stayed. We like slept in the afternoon. Started around 11 p.m. And so we thought, oh, okay, this will be like a 15-hour. It's like about 15 to 17, which at that point would have been my highest, longest kind of high pointing journey. Only I think like I realized throughout the way that like a lot of the trail, the lead up was just kind of really hard to find. So I think that ended up delaying us quite a bit, like trying to route find through pitch black.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that and Andrew did a lot of that route finding. The sun came up, and that's when we started to kind of see the mountain, like at least the final the kind of like peak of the mountain. And then from there, it was like, oh, okay. And I think I remember having this conversation where we look at it, and this mountain seems almost vertical to us, and we were thinking, how in the world are we how in the world are we supposed to climb this? It looks almost vertical.
Hmm.
Um, and in theory, it's supposed to be a class 3 climb. Like we kind of worked our way up, got to the summit in about, it was like 10:30, 10 or 10:30, something like that. I remember, like at least for me, I was going ahead at this point because I was feeling pretty good about. I was pretty feeling pretty good when we got to the steeper parts of the ramp. I remember there's like one more kind of big, like the last like 200-ish feet. There's like one more kind of big push. I ended up taking, I think, the wrong route, and I'm pretty sure I went into some like class 4 terrain
Oh.
where I think the whole route is supposed to be class 3. So going up this portion, I just remember thinking like, oh, this seems harder than what I saw online, but I can still do it. And because I was leading, and then once I saw that, I kind of turned back and to Andrew, I was like, "Don't go this way. This looks pretty complicated." Yeah, there were moments, especially on that last portion, where like it was if I kind of had one if I didn't put my foot correctly, or my hand slipped, I would definitely fall like something
Yeah.
like 50, 60, 100 feet or something, and so quite dangerous. But actually getting up that was pretty. Once I got to the kind of top of that portion, it was actually very nice. But it was very much like it wasn't as because the ramp itself is not, I think, terrible, but it was just that portion was very like the holds weren't great, and then the holds are also further than like they're further than the ramp, and so like all that it felt like, oh, I accomplished this great, this kind of it was cool, but at the same time, then we got to the summit, it was and great, but then
Hmm.
I remember we also had to turn around, and this is like especially going in and back, this is pretty heavy bear country, and not only bear country, this is like brown, grizzlies, and
Yeah.
so I was hoping to get out. I was hoping to kind of get out by like before sunset, um, and at that point, I think Andrew started to get a little tired. Plus, I think he like banged his knee up, so we were going so trying to deal with that was kind of a bit of a challenge. We also had lost our bear spray along the way, which
Oh
was
no.
yeah, so like I think it was one of our breaks. We kind of just lost it, and so we like knew roughly where we lost it, and once we did we had to do a little like scouting around that area. We finally found it, but
Did you need to use it?
no, thank God.
That's good. Good to have that.
Um, yeah, yeah. So we kind of, as we were kind of tracing our way back, like it's different, like especially the kind of lead up to the mountain, like that trail. I could see why, in the light, it was easier to see where it was going, but I could also see why it was very difficult in the dark. There's just not a super clear path.
Hmm.
And then and then going back, there was one time I think I got lost for 15 minutes just because I thought there was a route and there wasn't, and then I had to find the way back to the trail.
Yeah.
Um, and then that portion, I think, like as we were going, we were like by the time we'd gotten like about 5 miles out, it had started to get pretty dark, and at that point, Andrew's feeling a little bit tired, just like it was a long day.
Hmm.
Um, and so I kind of from the last bit, I like took his pack, and we are just like, let's just get out of here. Let's get out of here. Let's try to see. Just like let's hope that we don't find any black like, grizzlies around this time of night. So it was total round trip was about 23 hours, but it was a very like at the end it was very like type 2 fun, even though like my hope was that I wouldn't have had to take too much time off, and I had to take like an extra day just because the drive back would not have made sense.
That's crazy. You're going to climb Granite Peak and then drive back to Illinois. Is that the plan?
Yeah, that was the plan. It was
Wow.
supposed to be 3 days. It was supposed to be
I
like a
mean,
long
crazy in like
weekend.
a good way. I don't think it's, harmful, but
Yeah.
um that's a long couple days.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, you accomplished it. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. So would you say that Granite was maybe your most memorable accomplishment or your favorite high point?
Hmm. I think it was memorable. I think it was very memorable. Mostly because I liked like being with people, and also just like at
Yeah.
some point like um I guess helping out where I that was actually very like looking back on it, something I find I'm very proud of myself for kind of being able to help out in that moment.
Hmm.
Um uh So I think my favorite though is Rainier. I think I just love glaciated peaks. Uh,
Yeah. Did you take a guided hike to the top?
yeah. So the first attempt I did with RMI, and that was last summer. And then this summer I went with Alpine Ascents.
Okay. So what happened in the first attempt?
So in the first attempt we made it to Camp Muir. It was a bit of a snow. It was snowing at the time, so they were afraid, and it was a 5 day program, so we had an extra day. So they were afraid that because of the new snow, that there would be avalanche conditions on the upper mountain.
Hmm.
So they wanted to use the extra day to kind of scout out the route and see if it was avalanche conditions at the top. And what they found out that it was pretty bad. Like
Okay.
they actually showed us the avalanche pit test the day after, when they told us like, oh, we're not going to go be able to get to the top. They showed us the avalanche pit test, and they basically showed us at least like where it had failed so early that there was such a high risk
Wow.
of an avalanche happening. So that was like the first attempt. I mean, we went to Ingraham Flats and we like walked around. We walked over crevasses, and they showed us an avalanche pit test. So it was like
That's
still
good.
very enjoyable.
What time of year did you go?
So the first time I went in mid June, that
Okay.
would be with RMI. The second time I went like I was like at late June, early July. Like
Okay. And those were good conditions.
yeah, I was kind of told that going like mid to late June was the best conditions wise, because the snowpack was you said we had enough of a snowpack early in the season, but then the weather also stabilized, so it was kind of that sweet spot of like having enough snow plus having stable weather.
Hmm. And so what made Rainier your favorite?
I really liked, I think, glaciated mountains. I like being in the cold. In a way, it was, I don't know. I guess I've always liked being in the cold, so maybe that's part of it. It was also kind of, I remember when I started high pointing, like I did not think I would get to Rainier. Like I didn't think I would get any of these big peaks. I was probably at the time content. Like if you told me in 2020, I probably would have been content just doing all the points east of the Mississippi.
Hmm.
Um, so Rainier is never a goal of mine, and until like as I gained experience, I was like, oh, maybe I can try Rainier, see how that goes. Um,
Yeah, it is a big accomplishment, whether you summit or not. Just getting off that mountain, you learn a lot and you feel like a real mountaineer, maybe not high altitude. but just for the skills that you've acquired doing that
Mhm.
climb.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, like it's also like those skills are super at least like I remember at least some of the skills that they taught us the year before when they're kind of reteaching when they're teaching those skills again during my attempt this year on Rainier. Like they're teaching like how do you climb like a steepish hill and with the duck walk and so I incorporate actually some of those I incorporate even on like non snow covered mountains. I still like
Yeah.
especially if it's a steepish peak like I'll kind of half duck walk up. Those lessons I think are super interesting and they're for people who like know have been in the mountains for years. This is in a way it's also like a knowledge transfer
Hmm.
um like they're kind of either are teaching us how to like go do mountaineering in the safest way possible in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I remember on the summit day, they had us, hike for an hour or hike for 50 minutes, sit down for 10 minutes, drink some water.
Mm.
And the peaks that I've climbed after Rainier, I don't make myself do that. And then I get dehydrated, I'll get a headache, I'll feel miserable. And then looking back, I'll go, where did I go wrong? And I'll think, well, obviously I didn't drink enough water in it. And then I'll tell myself, yeah, but I wasn't thirsty. But it doesn't matter, you know? And I think back to some of those times like that on Rainier or some other guided climbs I've done where they just say, it doesn't matter if you're thirsty, it doesn't matter if you're hungry, you sit down, you eat, and you drink, and just trust us. And yeah, super wish I did that on Humphreys Peak and Wheeler Peak. On Humphreys and Wheeler, I wish that I had, and it wasn't long after I climbed Rainier that I climbed those two, and I just like everything the guides told me just kind of went out the window, and I tried to rush up those peaks coming from North Carolina. Yeah, I summited, but it was totally miserable, and there was vomit. So
Oh.
anyway, you didn't ask, so I told you anyway. But so Rainier was your favorite.
I would say, at least for me, it was not like I think I came into this anticipating a huge challenge with a very difficult mountain, and I was a little surprised, at least based on my own expectations, to realize it wasn't as bad as I thought. And some of that I think was like I actually really liked the cleaver for one, which that might be an unpopular opinion. I really did like the cleaver.
Okay,
Um, according to the guides, that even for the guides, they hate the cleaver.
that's like the rocky part, isn't it? Like all the
Yeah.
boulders.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just didn't like my crampons just sliding across the rocks. It just kind of gave these like nails across a chalkboard vibe. But that's petty. Go on.
No, and I think it was just I felt alive in those conditions.
Hmm.
In a way that like I felt there's like a certain thing that being in the ice like I think does to me. I think I'm a very cold body in general, so like being in the
Okay.
ice is very enjoyable.
Wow. Yeah. I wasn't expecting the cleaver. I knew that
Mhm.
the route that I was taking, but I was like,
Right.
there's so many rocks. I just expected more snow. But you know where I felt alive on that mountain is the bowling alley,
Uh, you, I can't remember where that is.
the rock fall,
Oh, on the
where you have
Cleaver?
to run
Yeah, yeah,
across. I say I felt alive
yeah,
because it was like you have to be alert.
yeah, yeah. It wasn't that bad going up, which was strange because there was quite a bit of like I expected more rockfall going up, but I think people were good going up. Coming down was a different story. It was a lot of like it was a lot of people kicking rocks above us, and then like
Oh,
we had to
wow.
be careful kicking rocks. So yeah, we didn't have as much trouble. Going up, it wasn't that bad, but coming back, like we had to be really careful getting down the cleaver.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So, what would you say is your most memorable or your favorite high point east of the Mississippi
East of the Mississippi.
or in the
Hmm.
South?
Um, I guess east would be, I would say Washington, and it's because the first time I did Washington, I did it with a friend of mine. I did it with a college friend of mine. Um, and this was during COVID, and this was also one of my earliest hikes. Um, I didn't appreciate Mount Washington in like the end of May, which is to say it is very very much snowed out. Like there's ice on the mountain.
Okay.
I didn't anticipate that because I'd done Marcy the day before, and like they gave us micro spikes, but I didn't have to really use it to
Hmm.
get to the summit of Marcy. So I thought, oh, it's not. It's only like 1,000 feet higher in elevation. What difference can that make? And had on I had on like a t-shirt, my thermal long sleeve, and then like my windbreaker going up Mount Washington in the end of May, and like going up it with a friend. I didn't realize the conditions I would be getting into, and it was and like we would get well, once we kind of got out of the initial part, it was just sheer ice, and that was the
Wow.
first time. And I remember thinking, oh, that was maybe not the best decision I made clothing wise or feet. Like I didn't have micro spikes at the time, so I
Wow.
just
Were
had
there
these.
other people on the trail at that time?
No, not really. I think they
Oh,
were all
wow.
coming down, if I remember. So, we were going through this was the route was the Amanusic route. So there's a cabin up there. We were shooting for the cabin, and it was a lot of, being really careful on the ice, and even just getting to the summit. Like getting to the summit was like not particularly easy because it was blowing wind and really it. So I looked it up afterwards, and at the summit it was I think 25 degrees with like about a 60-mile-an-hour gust.
Oh, no. I mean,
Yeah,
it's been worse, but that's pretty bad.
yeah, and especially for someone like me that didn't quite dress for the occasion. Like I was actually fine going up,
Okay.
like clothing wise, but just sitting, like try actually sitting at the summit because we thought, oh, let's try to wait this like kind of wind and snowstorm out, and it
Oh,
was not. It didn't let up, but I also just started to. I started to get probably a little bit of hypothermia. It was like I was shivering quite a lot.
oh no.
And then coming back down, I this is where like I think I was lucky to have a partner I was lucky to have a hiking partner that actually knew her way off the mountain, because otherwise,
Hmm.
oh boy, like I did not know where to go, and it would have been me just searching for like good couple hours if I didn't know. But because she knew, it was a lot easier. And once we got off the upper mountain, it was a lot better.
Hmm.
So the way we came down was through like it was the railway, like at least there's a trail close
Right.
to it.
Yeah.
So that was actually not like once we got off the upper mountain, then it was a lot nicer. But I think it was memorable because I think in retrospect I would not do that again. Like
So
that
type
was
three kind of fun there.
yeah, like, or at least I would do it differently. I would not do it like I would do a lot more research about the conditions and have a lot more gear with me. But I think at
Sure.
the same time, I also know what to do with that gear now.
Sure. Yeah. So after Mount Washington,
Mhm.
did you kind of slow down after that experience or did you keep going?
Not really. I guess uh, my I think I realized later, like looking back on it, I remember reading this article, and I'll talk about this article at the very end. It has a
Hmm.
similar I think someone said once in mountaineering you kind of have three strikes, and then like the idea being that like if you accumulate mistakes, like one of those mistakes is bound to kill you. So
Hmm.
I think at the time I remember thinking like, yeah, I was lucky. I probably didn't think much more of it than that and just kind of kept moving. In retrospect, I think about it and I think um, that was a learning opportunity for me to like know what not to do. And I got lucky. Like that was an extraordinary. I was extraordinarily lucky, but it also put me. I'm gonna kind of wander here because this reminded me of something. Like so, the first time the first time I went up Rainier and we had to come back down, there's some consternation among some people in the group. Like, oh, we paid like X amount of dollars. Why can't we go to the summit?
Yeah.
And I remember I told them like, look, I have made that decision before to go up when I was not ready, and it was not a decision that I would want to have happen because like that I got lucky in that moment. That was a very like in retrospect, I would do it differently. And it's better that it's like you're almost tempting fate. And there's only so often that you can tempt fate before it kind of, you kind of end up on the wrong end of the statistical odds.
That's very wise. We had a climber like that on a did a guided attempt up the Mountaineers route in Whitney in late
Mm-hmm.
spring,
Mm-hmm.
and same story. Summit day, the guide said, no, it's not happening. There was a storm the night before, it was awful.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a climber in our group who had attempted Mount Baker with, one of the guiding companies, and the weather was awful, and the guide took them up, and they got lost in just a total whiteout. And
Right.
so they made it to the summit, they made it down, but he's like, I would never want to do that again. And because there were some other people in the group who brought up the financial issue, and I took this time off of work, but those arguments don't stand up to nature.
I think this comes back to, I think because I think we see it as like a customer, like almost like almost like a consumer relationship of like, since you're the provider, I'm giving you money, you have to provide X, and
Sure. Hmm.
that's not how like mountaineering works. It, like, you can't guarantee I mean, a lot of like, I think many of your readers will know, like Into Thin Air, a lot of the kind of psychological push of that, of like Rob Hall and those guides, was that they felt like they needed to uphold their like, their summit percentage, whatever. I
Yeah.
forget if they felt like they needed to summit so that they could like make, like, say, kind of advertise, oh, we have this really high percentage of summiters. And I
Hmm.
think that's why they got, you know they got stranded past the turnaround time, hence they got stuck in the blizzard, et cetera, et cetera. um
Yeah.
yeah, so like
Well,
I think
especially
that.
that one client, Doug, the mailman.
Mm,
I forget his last name, but he had, put in his life savings multiple times to attempt the mountain. This was obviously his last attempt, but I remember John Krakauer writing, like, the guides felt an obligation. Like, this guy gave up so much money and so much
mm,
time. Considering he didn't make a ton of money, he gave up everything he had multiple times.
right.
They're like, we got to get him up. And those simple decisions could just be life ending. But you know what? Before we started recording, you and I had a conversation last week, and
Mm,
we did talk about social media and
mm,
outdoor influencers and
mm.
kind of how that's changed hiking or outdoor adventure in terms of what motivates people to get outside and to do these adventures.
So this is something I've also kind of had to deal with, right? Like, I've thought about, oh, I've traveled like many places, should I start an Instagram, in terms of, like, I have all these pretty pictures. Whenever I send some of my photos to my friends, they always comment on how beautiful that looks. And so part of me thought about that, and I realized that, at least for me, if I was to start an let's start an Instagram, I feel like it would, even if I started under this premise of, oh, I'm just uploading photos, there's no kind of impetus. Like, I feel like there would eventually, like, I would start to have an impetus, like, I need to go and take photos so that I can upload to my Instagram. Um, that I think that I thought was not the healthiest of kind of drives, in terms of
Yeah.
like going into the mountains. Like, I'd want to go because I enjoy going to the mountains, not because, oh, I have to take a picture so I can put it on social media. And I also think that there's an element sometimes, so, like, and I say this, like, understanding, like, photos are really important. Like, I take photos too, and for
Absolutely.
me, like, I use a lot of my photos to really, I use my photos to really help remind me, like, what I've done,
Hmm.
like, how the scenery looks, what I've done. But, like, past that, I think it's all, to me, I see it as an experience. Like, it's trying to be immersed in that experience as much as possible. And sometimes, like, that means that like taking photos is a bit of a like that can kind of interrupt in certain ways with that experience, like being in the mountains, being in that nature, like engaging all of my senses in like a remote part of the country that like I might not I don't live in, and I wouldn't come back super often. So it's kind of like in a way it's almost like trying to it's like trying to like feel like being part of that like trip or wherever I am.
Yeah, I think when you force yourself to take pictures, you're removing yourself from the present moment in a way. And I see people sometimes filming on hikes and stuff, or they're filming the scenery, or doing like a 180 or a 360 or whatever, and they're literally looking through the phone to see the landscape that is right
Right.
before them. And I don't want to sound condescending because I'm sure I've done the same thing, but it is something that I've noticed the older I get, I guess. And I was in college when Facebook was invented, so I, you know, take that for what it is. That I've been looking at social media from, I guess, my 20s on. I didn't grow up with it. So, but I always, and I've said this on the podcast before, it's like before you plan a trip or an expedition or some kind of adventure, it's like, do you want to do this for yourself, or do you think that your followers expect this out of you? Like, would you go to this place if you knew that you couldn't put it on Instagram or wherever you post? And yeah, taking pictures is important. I love it. I do that, like you said, because sometimes I like looking through it and I'm like, oh, remember when I went there? That was so much fun. And I remember this and that. And I always like to, I have a map right in the wall in front of me. You can't see it, but it just shows like the high points that I've done and the parks that I've been to and
Mm-hmm.
different road trips that I want to do. We love that as high pointers. We love those visual things. We love maps
Right.
and looking at where have I gone? Where do I want to go? What's my favorite trip? What's the next one on the calendar? But I think there's something special to just having those memories for yourself and not for the rest of the world. Now I say that having a podcast on Apple and Spotify and all that. So. Are there any high pointing trips that did not go according to plan? I would imagine it's probably the Mount Washington trip, right?
I was on Kings Peak in Utah, so this was also like a 1 day climb. So getting out from Salt Lake, I got to the parking lot. I think around like 2 or 3 in the morning. I was gonna try to wake up at like 5:30 to try to get to the summit before the thunderstorms rolled in. Um, I think I woke up an hour later than that, just from exhaustion. So woke up an hour later, got going, and it was like I was doing pretty well until like Anderson Pass, which is like the last zero point 0.7 miles to the summit. And then it started, and then like as I started to kind of work my way up, it started to thunder. Like we could hear it in the distance. We could hear it, and I could start to feel it too.
Oh gosh.
Um, so we started to
It,
turn around. Yeah.
wait, what did you feel? You didn't feel the lightning, did you?
No, no. It's just like like my hair standing up and
Oh.
like the static that.
Yeah, oh, okay. Yeah.
So and everyone started to turn around, and so I started to turn around. And so everyone started to leave the mountain. And I like so the way that Kings Peak is generally situated, there is like a bowl area underneath. But that area tends to be like it's relatively flat. Like you get to Anderson Pass, there is like a somewhat of a descent, and then there's like a flattish area for about, if I remember correctly, about a half mile or so. So I thought like, well, oh well, I'm here, and I got off like the top of the mountain, so I figured I can hopefully like if I get under Anderson Pass, that might be good enough for now, just because of the flat area. In retrospect, maybe not the safest decision I've ever made, but I just thought if I could get off of like Anderson Pass, that's like the tallest point in that general area. So then like hopefully there's a lower chance that I get struck by lightning if that were to roll around. And then I was just frantically like I was looking at the weather radar, and I was trying to see, okay, is there a weather window in the next? I think at this point I gave myself an hour because I knew I wanted to get out. I wanted to get out of the trail probably just like about sunset. and I had about an hour at the summit, and I was going to turn around if like conditions weren't better in an hour. I was going to turn around, and I saw the prediction was that I think 50 minutes in there would be a window that opened up. So I was just waiting, and then there's at the time there were three other guys, and these guys were all like strapped up with like 40 pounds, like they were camping out there.
Hmm.
I was just in my day pack because I was, going as a like going there and back. And so they were wondering if they were going to go to the summit, and like my weather app, I just kept refreshing the weather radar, and it kept kind of at least staying on track that like it was going to open up at that time, at that exact time, and it did actually. It opened up about 10 minutes to spare in my kind of like decision window. So I said, okay, we'll shoot up, like at least for the next hour it was clear. So I was like, okay, let's try to get to the summit and get back down. I get to the summit about 40 to 45 minutes with these three guys, and then I start to hear thunder in the distance. And when I refreshed the app at the summit, like a new round of thunderstorms was coming in. So I was like, okay, well, we got like 5 minutes, and like we got like 5 minutes, and we have to like run down this mountain.
Oh my God.
At least the summit portion of the mountain, and then which was interesting because it was a lot of hearing thunders. Like as we were starting to go down, you just hear thunder. You hear thunder that like in the somewhat close-ish distance, and
Hmm.
I'm just hoping that it doesn't get anywhere close to where like I didn't see any like big like I didn't see any lightning like hit the ground, but I did see like
Yeah.
lightning in the clouds, and that was an interesting experience. And then once I kind of got off of that portion of the mountain, then it was just like there was still thunder until for at least a couple hours, but at that point I felt a little safer having kind of
Yeah.
gotten off the tallest portion. And then it was just a matter of like hoping that it didn't actually strike me. But because at that point I was like, well, I'm here, like it's kind of hoping that nature doesn't take me down.
And I'm assuming it was wet too.
Yeah, there it wasn't as wet as it wasn't super wet, but it was some. It was a little wet. Yeah,
When was this?
this was last year. Yeah, this was last July.
So, living in Chicago, how do you train for these high peaks?
Oh, so I work out with the Chicago Triathlon team. So they do a lot, and I slightly modify those workouts to be more endurance based.
Hmm.
Um, because at least from reading, I think Steve House's book on mountaineering training, like what I got out of it was that endurance training is really important. So I modify the workouts to be a little more endurance heavy, less like speed, but that seems to help in terms of like running and biking and swimming. Those tend to, I find that doing that for like some an endurance time frame, and adding like a CrossFit workout once a week, that combination seems to help me in the mountains
Okay.
quite a bit.
Have you ever gotten altitude sickness?
Not like altitude sickness, not in a like nausea type of way. I've definitely felt the altitude before.
Hmm.
Um, I think earlier in my like early when I was starting to get to like the 14ers, like the first couple 14ers, I felt it as like I was just more exhausted. Part of that is also I I think the early 14ers I don't think I fully respected how like altitude sickness can, or like how the altitude can affect you if you're not like well hydrated or well fed. And so like
Hmm.
the way I usually travel to a lot of these peaks is like I usually try to do a weekend trip because that I can kind of fit that in.
Yeah.
So it's like fly out like Friday night from Chicago, which is like 570 feet altitude wise.
Hmm.
um so like fly out, um go to so like pick your high point, like fly to that airport, drive, and then like usually spend the night at a hotel or in the car depending on like if I could find a place to sleep in the car. Then next morning go to the trailhead, start hiking up, which is like a really quick turnaround.
Hmm.
Would you So there's usually I'm not getting like the greatest rest, and I'm trying. So like, and definitely earlier that made a big impact. Like I was, as in like, I never got sick, but I was very like definitely near the summit. I could start to feel it more. And it's kind of like what you said about Rainier. Like when I was doing like on the Rainier trip, when it was much more like, oh, okay, we're gonna sleep for like 8 hours and we're gonna like rest every hour, like that. Like I didn't get altitude sick at all through
Yeah.
that trip.
Hmm.
Um, and even like later on, I've started. I think it's just perhaps my body being at that altitude so frequently. I think it just has made me acclimatize better,
Hmm.
and or like and also probably I'm also eating better, getting better sleep, things like that. Like I also respect how much energy it takes to kind of like that turnaround from like being in my house Friday evening to like being on the summit Saturday morning to like to noon is not, that's like a very difficult thing and I have to be ready.
So,
Mm-hmm.
what's your next high point?
Well, so technically Denali,
Hmm.
because that's the only one left in terms of high pointing.
Was
In terms
that
of mountain,
is it on the calendar?
that's on the calendar for like a couple years from now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and that's an interesting decision too, because I think in theory I could have tried to push for Denali. Had I reoriented stuff, I could have actually probably pushed for Denali this year or like this upcoming year. Had I done like a training course in Rainier, that would be both like a training course in the mountains plus like a summit of Rainier.
Hmm.
Had that gone well, then in theory, had that gone well and we summited and I did very well, then in theory I'd be, I could go to Denali this year. I felt like that wasn't the best option. I liked the mountains so much the previous year because when I did Hood and Rainier, I realized I actually want to like there is a I think there's a kind of beauty in learning how to mountaineer and not just kind of being like learning actually how to mountaineer. Like one of the goals I have is like hopefully when I have kids that I get to help that I have almost get to guide them up Rainier.
Yeah.
So to do that, I'd have to like learn the skills and actually be immersed in the environment, and that's something I want. Like, and that's something because of that, I wanted to take a slower approach to mountaineering, like really getting to learn all the basics and like go through a lot of the intermediate mountains. Even though, like in theory, I could have jumped from Rainier straight to Denali. I wanted to kind of like do some of the intermediate peaks. So like this winter I'm going to Ecuador. I'm hoping to go to
Oh, nice. To do
Aconcagua.
the volcanoes.
Yeah, and like
Very good.
like going to Aconcagua, and then doing like more training sort of exercises in terms of
Hmm.
like both the beginners training and also the intermediate training, to like really understand what I'm doing in the mountains,
That's great.
understanding avalanche terrain, et cetera, et cetera. Because like if I were to go up Rainier right now, I would be like I wouldn't trust myself to go up Rainier because I right now can't really identify avalanche terrain. Like,
Right.
so like I mean, which is why I had a guide, but it's like knowing that I I want to learn that. So like, and that takes time. That's something I've learned and is in being a part of a grad school program is some of these lessons. It's not just you learn it; like it has to sink in, and that takes quite a bit of time for things to sink in. It takes experience. It takes doing it multiple times.
Yeah, and you're describing the attributes that the guides have, is they have the experience and they've had it over time, and that's why we pay them, and that's why we trust them, to guide us to wherever we end up getting to, either the summit or not, but
Right.
more importantly, to guide us back down.
A lot of it for the guides is that like they know that they turn around a lot. Talking to some of those guides, like they are frequently like, oh, we turn around, like even in their own personal climbs, they're like, oh, we turn around when we think like I remember one of the guides telling me they went to, I think it was Europe. They wanted to climb one of the peaks in the Alps and they had to go like 3 times to actually get
Mm.
enough of a window. And these are obviously super amazing athletes. Like,
Yeah.
um, and even like I've been reading Reinhold Messner's, at least there's an interview he did, and he talks about in that interview. I think it's like of the Himalayan peaks he did. Um, and this is, I mean, this is like probably the best mountaineer in the world. He, had a 50% success rate. He
Hmm.
turned around very
Hmm.
frequently.
Yeah.
Um, so I think like that's, I think, something I realized while being in in like mountaineering is like sometimes it's okay to realize like, hey, like I'd be disappointed if I'd be a little disappointed in myself if I stopped, if like we couldn't get to the summit because there's something with me, like I was too sick or altitude sick or whatever. I think it's a little different with, like, I've realized like when it comes to the weather, that's just the weather. There's an element of
Yeah. It's out of your
chance.
control.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And, that's something that when you brought up Reinhold Messner's book, that made me think of all of the adventure books, documentaries that we watch, or even if there's somebody on social media you follow, more often than not, we see their successes. They don't make a documentary about that time they turn around. Maybe they do, and I'm just forgetting those couple documentaries. I don't know, but you see the times that they make it to the top, and they'll, throughout the documentary, they'll say, "Oh, I tried it this time and I turned around," whatever. But the feature film is about the summit,
Right.
and same with most books about expeditions. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
writes about a book about the time they had to turn around. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, that these mountaineers that we admire them because of their sound decision making and their risk assessment.
Right. And I mean, maybe there should be more of an emphasis. In a way, like, I understand why that. I understand that there is a reason why, like, the feature film is about the summit, right? That's the
Of
catchy
course.
thing.
Of course. Yeah.
Um, but it's, I think about it like, working in science. There's a similar concept of like, the big discovery is based on so many failures, right? It's like, I think the statistic is like 90% of your experiments fail and like 10% succeed. And and even of that 10%, it's like the subset of the 10% are like the experiments that like are showing like you have these, like of those 10%, there's like a small subset of those experiments that actually change the world, like push new discoveries, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
So you kind and obviously in that case, when you like see a press release or a paper or a scientific paper, they don't talk about all the times they failed and what exact ways they failed. So I see it very similar to like mountaineering. Like there's a lot of like learning, and if not failure, then just like a lot of learning that goes on behind the scenes that we don't talk about, but for autobiographies or biographies or autobiographies or
That's
things of
correct.
that things of
Yeah.
that sort. That's the only time you learn about like a lot of these different aspects of their lives, like, oh, that they failed, or um but otherwise, yeah, the because otherwise it is just like, um here's the result of all of this, right?
I would imagine in the field you're
Mm-hmm.
in, there's probably a lot of metaphors that you can make between the scientific method or research and mountaineering.
The biggest thing in science, this is something I had to learn in grad school, is that there's so many things to explore in science.
Hmm.
Same thing in mountaineering. There's so many things to do. It's what is the right thing to do at that specific moment, and
Oh, yeah.
that's something I like is more, I think, a little more evident in science, because there's like being like right now, in a way, there's like four different projects that I'm working on at various stages of complete, going from like not close to complete to like things that are pretty close. And a lot of it is what did we want to explore. There's so many things that we could explore, even in like our little bailiwick, if you will.
Hmm.
But it's like, how do we, like, what things are the most important things to look at? um, Making that determination. I think in mountaineering it's very similar in terms of what mountains are the next to climb, given, at least in my case, like my skill set. Like, I don't know that I could do Rainier right now, but what's the next challenge that I can take? Um, what's the next thing I want to learn? So I think in that way, that's where I see like some of the biggest similarities. They're obviously quite numbered. my boss actually often uses like doing science. He compares it to going to the Grand Canyon because he's from Arizona. So he talks about the idea of exploring the Grand Canyon, um, talking about like how as the boss, he's the expedition leader, and we're the explorers kind of working under working for him, and then like how that process happens of how you kind of map the Grand Canyon and all
Hmm.
these. So like it's in a way like we hear that, at least we in our lab hear that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, that's really interesting. Once you complete Denali, um, in terms of peaks or lists in the United States, what would be next?
In the United States, or
Yeah.
can I? Oh,
If you want to go abroad too.
yeah, I have a couple ideas abroad. I was thinking like abroad. I've kind of thought about this. I think abroad I'd want to do like Mont Blanc kind of by
Mm,
myself.
mm-hmm.
Um, Mount Logan seems pretty cool, and then it's like Lenin Peak out in Central Asia. Those sound like Lenin Peak's about a 7,000 meter mountain.
Okay.
Um, like Mount Logan in Canada. I mean, it's not as tall as Denali, but it's similar in altitude, like similar in like latitude, and also slightly more remote.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be like a cool adventure. And then like doing Mont Blanc by myself, like hopefully having gained enough skills, I would want to try that. Um,
Very
like
nice.
learning the skills. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, how would you say high pointing in the outdoors has enriched your life?
I think it. So I think about it like as it's really changed how I view the world. I naturally am a very kind of how do I want to say this? Like naturally, I'm very passionate, but also very, which means that I tend to be like a type A to an extent. Like I care about like trying to finish things, having some level of like trying to have some level of control and being a little neurotic, but also like being driven and hardworking and ambitious. Um, and what mountaineering kind of taught me is that there's so many things kind of out of my control,
Hmm.
and there are times that it's best to kind of let things play out a little bit. Um, it's the same thing in mountaineering. There are many times where you just kind of go on the trail and just see what happens and then play off of it. And that's something I've learned doing that. Like not being so rigid and stuck to a plan. Like seeing what happens and then changing accordingly. It's made me, I think, quite a bit more patient person. Like realizing that like not every sometimes waiting for things to happen can sometimes open doors rather than kind of forcing them open.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's made me much more appreciative of just just kind of going with the flow a little bit. Like then there's like I realize like there's a nice balance in between. Like there are certain things you should kind of go with the flow on versus like there's certain things you should be more take initiative and take charge. And
Yeah.
like it's in a way it's almost kind of complemented my natural instincts to kind of
Hmm.
give me a to like at least so such that I can understand much more. I can like in a situation I have much more kind of different ways to tackle a given situation that
Yeah.
feel more natural to me now that I've like been in the mountains and I've kind of learned some of these kind of life lessons from the mountains.
Yeah. Nature is a great teacher. I think one of the things that I've learned while I was high pointing was I got pregnant um, in the high pointing journey, and I was like, oh, I can't stop. I gotta go. I gotta keep going. However, I gotta make it work. So while I was pregnant, I did all the southern high points, and then I had my daughter. I was like, all right, we gotta get one of those, you know, front loader things.
Yeah.
And I hate front loading, by the way. There's a reason we carry stuff on our backs. Um, but now I'm just so much more patient. I'm like, that peak's not going anywhere. And how cool would it be if her and I could go up there together one day when she's ready.
Mhm.
And because, there's always the option of like, I could just have her stay home with my husband and I'll go out by myself or something. I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't want to do that. Now I want to have these experiences with my family and I'm willing to wait.
Right.
Um, you know, However old she is, I'm not going to be one of those parents. And these parents are all over Instagram. Please look at what my kid can do. Look at the adventures my kid goes on, parents. I'm like, see, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that is it's like the kid being, for lack of a better term, kind of pushed into it
Oh, absolutely.
because
100%.
a lot of it, I think a lot of it is like, you know, not that I've like I've worked with kids a lot, but I have worked with kids like to some extent, and a lot of it is like they have their own interests, and it's not a
Hmm.
bad thing to be like, oh, this might be something you're interested in, but at the same time, there is a kind of element of like parents pushing and with certain things
Yeah.
that I find kind of in some, and when it gets really bad, it's pretty grotesque. But I think like so in that way, I feel like a lot of it is also resources. It's like if your kid can do X when they're super young, there's resources there. Like
Hmm.
my for example, like my parents were we did fine, but like I don't think we would have ever done Rainier. Like I don't know if that would ever have been in the budget, even
Yeah.
if but
Yeah.
and a lot of it is also just like having parents that are like super into the outdoors, plus having resources on top of that,
Hmm.
plus having someone who's very who wants to do it. And that's not to discount any of the kind of amazing records that we're seeing kind of falling when it comes to
Sure.
like how young, like I don't mean to discount any of that. It's just more that it's like understanding the support network is real, like for someone who, especially when they're younger, is just very um it's very different. And that's something I've learned because I really got into high pointing. I was in my very early 20s
Hmm.
when I started high pointing. Like I'm in my mid 20s right now. Um and it's been like 5 years, so like there's a significant difference because I've almost had to like figure a lot of this stuff out on my own. Like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, what is it like, how do I operate in like the 13, like 12, 13, 14ers, like how what's the
Hmm.
best way I can get up these mountains, what's the logistics behind it, like living in Chicago, it's like how can I do some of these peaks and also miss as little time from work as I can, and like do, and a lot of those like logistical plan that gets covered somewhere else. And also it's like what about my own resources, like grad school doesn't, it's I get it. I'm doing fine financially, but like we don't get a tremendous amount of money as a
Hmm.
grad student. So it's a balance of like, okay, what trips can I take given what I have?
Yeah.
Um so that, and I think when it comes to someone like, and that I think has been very useful for me. Again, not to this is not to take away from anyone who's younger, like a lot of that is handled by their parents,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
I think it's different, and it's it's, and that, and obviously they can't make that decision. When you're younger, you don't get to make that decision,
For sure.
um but there is a kind of wisdom that comes from like having to figure out how to fit it in a very busy life that is
Yeah. Yeah.
different.
There is, and there's also a lot of excitement when you find your own hobby and maybe your parents don't introduce it to you. And I'll say that a lot of people on the podcast, when I say like, what got you started in the outdoors, what got you high pointing, they'll say, I grew up in a family that always went outside, um, but maybe necessarily they didn't go high pointing. And I've talked to a lot of father son, father daughter, mother daughter teens high
Mhm.
pointing,
Right, right.
and that's how they got started. But it was the focus of their high pointing was the bond there. It's so fun, and I think you might be able to relate to this when you discover your own hobby that you really love, and then you can get into it, and it becomes, as you're an adult, it becomes something to look forward to, maybe outside of the routine.
Yeah.
And when that's not handed to you, it's kind of nice that you figured it out on your own, and you can take a sense of ownership over that, and there's some autonomy um, built in there. But and it's nothing against these parents that bring your kids outside. That's a gift, and you should do that. Your kids should know, certain basic outdoor skills and things like that. But I guess I'm talking about the extremes, and I think people who
Yeah.
scroll through the outdoor Instagram
Hmm.
know what I'm talking about.
I say all that, but also at the same time, like I also probably there are things that I was kind of helped along the way, like having parents that were very happy to go on road trips. That really helped with
Hmm.
like some of these longer road trips. Like it was just second nature. I didn't. It wasn't until I started speaking to some of my friends that I realized like, oh, people really don't like to go on road trips longer than 2 hours. Like
I know
that's
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
like that's not something like in our family. I mean, we used to go on like 10, 10, 7, 8, 9, 10 hour road trips. Like, and
Hmm.
that was so normal to the point where like my parents drive, my brother lives in St. Louis and like my parents will drive from Pittsburgh. It's about a 12-hour drive. Like, when they go to visit him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, I guess so that's a way that I've been very blessed, is having that kind of road trip background. I mean,
Hmm.
I still had to learn how to like do the hiking and stuff, but having that road trip background was really important because like some of these trips out to like for example Granite or Gannett, like I road tripped out there. I didn't have to I didn't have to like get a flight, and getting a flight would have been really expensive with like all the
Yeah.
gear, and like so check-in would have been really expensive. Getting a car from there, so like the fact that I was able to do it and that I had figured out a way to do it like solo to Gannett, it was a solo trip. I went there by myself.
Wow.
Um, from Chicago. So I feel like some of the longer ones, like for Whitney, I flew out there. But then
Sure.
again, I kept my day pack really light. So it's like figuring all that out. But I still had that background in road tripping that has been really useful. And the other thing I've been, I think, fairly blessed with is I think just I naturally have a lot of resilience, that I think is really, in retrospect, really important.
Hmm.
There's so many portions of hiking because these are, we're talking 6 to 10 to potentially longer hours of you're on a trail, you know, your feet start to hurt, things start to ache, and the easiest thing to, at some point you're just like, why do I keep doing this?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but there's an element of resilience that is absolutely required, and that's something I had through my own life, something I built before high pointing.
Oh, yeah. And
So,
that skill is necessary for life, no matter what you do. Um, when you said, when you were talking about resilience, it reminded me of this Instagram reel that I saw this morning. I
mhm,
didn't repost it or anything just because I thought, I didn't know if anyone would find it as funny as I did, but it was this girl. She looked like an influencer, and she's at base camp on Everest,
mhm.
and she looks totally defeated. You know, like when they get super cold and they have like the dark spots on their cheeks and
Sure,
stuff like
yeah.
that. And she's like, "Oh, I just got back from camp too. Oh my God, this was so bad." And like I was getting sick, and she's going through all of these ailments that she had just
Mhm.
experienced at camp too. And then it cuts out to this guy, he's in his house, just like in a room like mine. And he goes, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do any of
Right,
that.
right, right.
And it's true. Like, we love talking about the suffering, and I do it all the time. And there's always that reality. It's just like, did you know that you did not have to do any of this? And it's just funny. You got to have some humor, you know?
Yeah, but I think there's a bit of masochism, and then that's not a
Oh,
bad
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
I fully recognize that I have quite a bit of masochism, but at the same time, I also know like the way I kind of deal with it is I look at the longer term picture. I'm like, if I can get the summit, that would be really cool as a memory, and it's kind of I think of it almost as like you get a gathering memories such that at difficult stages later in life, you kind of look back and think, oh, I have all these difficult memories. I have
Hmm.
these memories of where I've gone through, and it's, in that way, at least I see building resilience is almost like a one way, like almost like a one way knob, that you
Hmm.
keep turning it. There's so long as you remember what like the things you've gone through and like, oh, I've gone through worse. It helps with you know, it helps with like trying to get through some of those more difficult moments, both in life and in climbing. Now
Yeah,
there are other, you know, if there's like an injury or there are obviously nuances to that as well, but
for sure.
large, like, at least for me, I came into mountaineering kind of having that mindset already. Like I knew like through my own life experiences, I knew that I was very resilient, that I had gone through quite a bit, and that I also knew that like, and that I think has really helped me with a lot of like a lot of the high points. And like, so like at certain stages where people are like, this was the worst part of the climb, I just remember thinking, oh, I mean, I just put my head down and kept walking and it was fine. Because I remember people talk about like the 99 switchbacks on Whitney being awful, and I just remember thinking it was, I didn't think much of it. It was just like one foot in front of the other, and I just got up the 99 switchbacks.
Yeah.
That it
Yep.
wasn't like the most fun I've ever had, but at the same time, like I think that's always the mentality that I've come, and same thing with life as well. It's like I've come to this mentality of like, if as long as you can do the next, the next right thing. To
Hmm.
take like if you've ever heard that song from Frozen 2, uh,
Never seen Frozen.
oh, okay, so uh,
My
yeah, so
daughter's
there's
not that
this.
old. She's only 2.
Right. So there's a song about like everything is like bleak and like Frozen 2, and then like, so we have one of the main characters and she sings this, it's called like the next right thing. And basically what it is like, she's, the idea is just to do the next thing even if nothing is available to you. And that's something that both in life and in mountaineering is really important. Like even if you can't get to the summit, like what's the next thing that you can do? Even like when you get to camp, it's like, what's the next thing you could do? You could just sit down and do nothing, or you can start to help set up camp. You can start to organize your bag, like just as doing some of those things. It's something I think I've really kind of been able to crystallize that thought while high pointing, and then that I've been able to use in my own daily life of like, what is the next thing I need to do?
Hmm.
um, just so I don't feel like I'm like it to be as either useful to my own work, or even just as useful to the people, or like helping the people around me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think another lesson that we've all learned on the trail is like not everything has to be fun.
mhm.
And I think when you embrace that, or not embrace it, when you just know that that's a reality and you take that through life, you're going to experience a lot less disappointment. And this is super cheesy, but I was in the army for a few years,
Mhm.
and we're always we have to go through this like resilience training, and I'm talking like
Mhm.
PowerPoint training. Um, yeah, and the example that they would always use was an egg,
Mhm.
and they want to say, "Are you the egg that cracks?" And the point is that when you go through life or a climb or a hike or whatever, like there are going to be things that challenge you. Life for sure. Maybe you might get an easy hike or an easy climb or something, but you
Yeah.
cannot escape that aspect of life. And it's like, are you going to crack or what when you're challenged? And that is something that when you challenge yourself in the outdoors, you build up that resilience so that when an inconvenience or a challenge happens in life, that you don't just break easily. Um, God, I can't believe I just brought that up. I swear. I would watch those PowerPoints and I'm like, oh, please spare me. And here I am using it. Anyway,
No,
final question. Oh, go ahead.
okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, that's fair, because that's something I've always noticed, is this premise of like how I've heard about this in the armed forces. I don't know how real it is, but I know that like for some of the trainings, at least for like Green Beret training or SEAL training, a lot of that kind of initial stage is to kind of weed you out, like is to force you to hit your limit. Um, to see if
Yeah.
you could drop off, because much of the like many of those exercises is it's not an exercise, at least as they say. I've never gone through Green Beret training or SEAL training. My understanding is like a lot of that training is quite literally it, like, yes, you have to physically be able to do it. Most of it's not the physical, it's the mental. It's, can you do like a ton of push-ups? Can you do that? Like, and I
Yeah,
think mountaineering is really similar. It's less. You obviously have to be fit enough to do it. I don't discount that,
of course. Yeah.
but I think the majority of it is actually mental. It's do like it's can I keep pushing forward? Because if you tell yourself you can't, you can't. Like that doesn't matter. You can be physically fit and it's like things won't happen. And there are certain days like even in my own life where I'm like I don't really want to do this right now.
Oh,
But
I know. Yeah.
um but I think oftentimes, like at least when I go out, I'm like, okay, I think I could do this. Maybe I overestimate to a certain extent, but I think like for any kind of people who want to, and any of your listeners who really want to get into like high pointing or, I mean, you've had more success, you've had more illustrious high pointers on here than me, but that's like one piece of advice I can give. It's to say that like you have to find. I think you kind of mentioned it's like finding meaning in that suffering, which I'm sure is a quote from somewhere else I'm taking, but like it's really to find that meaning. It's why are you suffering? What is the goal at the end of the day?
Yeah.
If like pointless suffering is pointless, right? As much as like for example, like there are hikes I don't go on because I think yeah, even if it's like 5 6 miles, like I don't know that this is a like I don't know that what I'll get out of it is like super great. Like usually if I go hiking, it's like for the nature or like it's really cool nature or like
Well,
there's
I
a
think, yeah,
cool
you're going to do an ROI estimate, especially when you're balancing your time as a PhD student. You're going to say, is this worth my time?
yeah. Well, I was that's true. I was thinking more of like, do I really want to go hiking for? And, like there are
Mhm.
things I just don't do. Versus like I'm perfectly willing to do like a 20 odd mile hike because it's like oh the view from the top is super cool.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and or like look, it's a high point. That's a big. It's like so it's just to like find that meaning and like even at the worst moments, like don't. It's like not losing the reason why you're doing it.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, so long as it's not like a medical emergency or something, but like
Of
so
course.
so like not losing that me because like I've there are times I've been really exhausted, but I also realize like okay, if I just need to get to the next thing and then that'll like because I see like most of those are actually coming off mountains where I'm like, oh, I'm really tired, but I have to get to camp because that was actually Gannett, where I remember we actually got to the summit day 2 of Gannett. So, which is like that's a very long day one. It was a very
Hmm.
long day one, and day two we woke up really early, and so by the time I got off the summit, it was very exhausting. We still had 2 miles to go to get to our camp, and I just remember thinking, "Oh, this is so exhausting. Why not just like roll up here?" But at some point, I was like, you have to keep pushing because that's where camp is. That's where so it's just kind of like at least for me, that's how I see it. As like understanding like what the suffering is, and like almost kind of knowing when the next spot that you can kind of ease your suffering is. In
That's,
climbing, it's
yeah,
all as I say, in climbing, it's almost like you're finding a bit of a ledge to stop at. It's like at least
that's,
visualizing of that.
that's a good point. And it makes me think of, I've never been through Green Beret or SEAL training, but my husband has. And they all talk about in their initiation kind of tryout phase, one of the things that the evaluators will do to eliminate you is tell you, like, we're going to go on a run today, but they don't tell you how long it's going to be. And, or they'll give you another like endurance challenge. We're going to go for a
Mm-hmm.
swim. We're going to do, I don't know, this exercise, but we're not going to tell you the distance or the time. And
Mm-hmm.
so you let people, you kind of let the anxiety percolate in whoever is it's going to do that in. And that tells you, is this a person who's going to worry to the point where it's detrimental to the team and to themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they just going to, without knowing, just take the challenge head on? And it's a very easy way as an evaluator to, you know, check people off.
Right. Right.
But I'll get to the last question
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
This is my favorite question because it's always where I learn about a lot of new things. Do you have a book, documentary, or podcast that is outdoor related that you can recommend to our listeners and to me?
Oh, so I think we talked about this, and I decided to go with I like I like Outside Magazine, at least the
Okay. Yeah.
online
Yeah.
version.
Yeah.
It's a lot of there's a lot of cool stories on here. I would like to talk about if I could talk about a specific article. This kind of covers a lot of the social media stuff that we talked about. The article is called "Death on Shishapangma." So the basic premise of the article is that in early 2024 there was a race between two American women. They were trying to be the first American women to summit the 14 8,000 meter peaks.
Yep. Yep.
So these two had gotten to 13, and Shishapangma was their last one, and they were both on the mountain together. Uh, and what happened was, I think when they started to get to, I think they got past Camp Two, and they were headed for the both teams were headed for the summit, and two separate avalanches on the mountain came and killed them and their teams. And it was a very tragic story, but the article kind of goes through the pressure. It kind of goes through the pressure that kind of led them to make that fateful decision to go, even in conditions that at the time a lot of the Sherpas and other climbers thought were very dangerous conditions um, to go. That they I remember in the article they said that it was like it was kind of avalanche conditions like that. But these two American women went. It's almost trying to synthesize. I was trying to figure out why did they go, like why make that attempt
Yeah.
of going in conditions that were very avalanche prone. And I think it came down to social media because there's so essentially there of the two women were very different in how they kind of approached mountaineering. One was much more they'd taken a decade to kind of slowly work their way up the different 8,000 meter peaks, and the other was someone who just raced up, like basically like picked it up very, at least relatively recently, and then kind of like raced through the other 13 8,000 meter peaks. And so what it was interesting that in a way social media was kind of social media and also fame was kind of pushing them near the end because near the end like they were pretty close they were pretty close in terms of the number of 8,000 meter peaks. And that the article kind of over some period of time kind of builds up like, oh, to the point where like it's almost like understanding. I understand like the pressure that they felt, like they wanted to be the first American woman to do this.
Hmm.
um and so like that, and like over time, and what that meant was that even when they both got to Shishapangma, they didn't want to work together because they wanted to be the only one at the top, like the only American woman, which we like thinking about in this situation, we would find that to be somewhat. There are like I think that that was maybe not the wisest decision. But like I think the article does a really good job of, like contextualizing why they felt that way, and really the role social media did like played in that kind of attempt of, because the idea of like making it to like being the first one, that's a title that you can now because both of them wanted to write books about their experiences, and then so taking in a way like kind of taking advantage of the fact that, oh, I was the first American woman, like because no one would ever be able to take that away from them.
Yeah. Hmm.
But in doing so, I think sometimes like it's like as I was kind of as we were talking about earlier, you can kind of erode your safety margin, and to the point where you kind of forget that it's like these are mountains. These are very serious. It's a very serious endeavor, and mountains are in certain ways trying to kill you. They're so you have to be very careful. Kind of like losing track of that, and like losing track of that as it became like an all-consuming kind of rivalry of sorts.
That's called Death on Shishapangma, the
Yeah.
article, the title.
Hmm.
What issue from what issue of Outside?
I was the online. I saw it
Okay.
online. I don't
Okay.
100%
So
like.
yeah, somebody could probably just Google that title and then find it. Well, Guna, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for your time and good luck on Denali whenever that happens. Let me know. I'd love an update.
Yeah, yeah. I'd be happy to update your listeners when that happens.
Yeah, great.